Rome, 1943. The city was silent, but not asleep. Boots echoed across the cobblestones as German patrols swept through the streets. Every shadow could hide an informant. Every knock on the door could mean death. And somewhere inside the Vatican, there was a man the Nazis could not catch. A priest, an Irishman, a hunter's son from the countryside, who would soon become one of the most wanted men in occupied Rome. Because while the Gestapo searched tirelessly for him, he was building an underground network right under their noses, a network that would save thousands. But to understand how a priest became one of the Reich's most frustrating enemies, we have to go back, far from Rome, back to Ireland. In a moment, we're going inside occupied Rome. But first, drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from. I genuinely love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you're new here, welcome. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's coming next. There's a lot more history worth knowing about. Now, let's go back to Ireland, to 1898.
He was born in 1898 in rural County Cork. Not into power, not into privilege. His father was a farmer, and young Hugh grew up surrounded by hills, rain, and long, quiet roads. But there was something unusual about him even then. He was brilliant, athletic, fearless. The kind of boy who didn't step back from a challenge. He leaned toward it. Friends later said he had a natural charm, the type that made strangers trust him almost instantly. No one could have guessed that decades later, this same charisma would help him deceive one of the most feared secret police forces in history. At school, he excelled. Languages came easily. So did theology. So did debate. But what truly set him apart was something harder to teach: composure under pressure, a trait that would one day save his life and the lives of thousands more. Eventually, he entered the priesthood, not as an escape from the world, but as a way into it. His intelligence brought him to Rome, where he began working within the Vatican's administration. Few could imagine that the quiet cleric walking those marble corridors was preparing, unknowingly, for war. Then came World War II. At first, Rome felt distant from the chaos. But by 1943, that illusion shattered. German forces occupied the city. Fear spread quickly. Allied soldiers who escaped prison camps flooded into Rome, desperate, starving, hunted. Jews were rounded up. Resistance fighters vanished overnight. Anyone who helped them faced execution. Most people looked away. It was safer not to see. But Hugh O'Flaherty was not most people. The story goes that it began with a single request. A prisoner had escaped. He needed somewhere to hide, just for a night. The priest agreed. One night became 2, then 5, then 10. Soon there were dozens, and suddenly, without planning it, he found himself running an escape operation. But hiding one person is an act of kindness. Hiding hundreds, that is rebellion. He recruited allies carefully, a diplomat here, a nun there, sympathetic civilians, even prisoners willing to risk everything. They forged documents, smuggled food, created safe houses across the city, monasteries, apartments, farmhouses, anywhere a human life could disappear. There were no phones, no encrypted radios, only trust and courage. If even one person talked under interrogation, everything would collapse. Yet somehow, it didn't. Historians estimate the network helped save over 6,000 people, an operation so vast that many participants never even knew who led it. They only knew the priest. The German security forces were not blind. Leading the hunt was Herbert Kappler, the feared SS and Gestapo chief in Rome, a career officer, cold, methodical, patient, the kind of man who did not believe in luck. Only intelligence, only results. When reports began mentioning a mysterious cleric helping Allied escapees,
Kappler made it personal. He wanted a name. He wanted a face. And above all, he wanted the operation destroyed. Because every soldier that vanished into the countryside was one less prisoner for the Reich. There was one problem. The priest lived inside the safety of Vatican City, technically neutral, technically untouchable. German forces could surround it, watch it, infiltrate it, but they could not simply march in. So Kappler adapted. If he could not enter the Vatican, he would wait outside it. Soon, German patrols began watching the very edge of the border, especially a thin white line painted on the pavement of St. Peter's Square, a line that separated safety from capture. The priest learned to treat that line like the edge of a cliff. Witnesses later said he would walk right up to it, sometimes with German officers staring only meters away, calmly smoking a pipe, as if daring them, as if reminding them, you cannot cross. But neutrality has limits, and Hugh knew something terrifying. The moment he stepped beyond that line, he was prey. Staying inside the Vatican was safe. Saving lives required leaving it. So he did what few priests would ever imagine. He became someone else, again and again. A construction worker, a postman, a laborer covered in dust. Even, on more than one occasion, a German-speaking official. He darkened his skin with boot polish to avoid recognition at night, changed hats constantly, walked with different postures, different speeds, different accents. Rome became his stage, and he, its most unlikely actor. It is said that German patrols unknowingly saluted him more than once, mistaking him for one of their own. Kappler was growing impatient. Men like him did not tolerate ghosts, so he prepared a trap. Using false intelligence, the Germans attempted to lure the priest beyond Vatican protection. A staged meeting. Informants planted among refugees. Whatever the method, the goal was simple. Get him across the line. Alive if possible. Dead if necessary. But Hugh had developed something like a sixth sense. Perhaps it was intuition, perhaps experience, perhaps faith. At the last moment, he didn't go. Days later, several resistance members were arrested nearby. He understood immediately. He had been the target. From that moment on, the hunt intensified. Then came one of the darkest moments of the occupation. After a partisan attack killed German soldiers, Nazi leadership ordered a reprisal. 335 civilians and prisoners were taken to the Ardeatine caves and executed. The message was unmistakable. Resistance would be paid for in blood. Rome froze in horror. But something unexpected happened. Instead of shrinking the underground, the massacre hardened it. Even those who had once looked away began quietly helping, and the priest worked harder than ever. By early 1944, distant thunder could sometimes be heard beyond the city. Allied forces were pushing north through Italy. Hope, fragile but electric, began to spread. The Germans sensed it too, which made them more dangerous. Desperate regimes rarely loosen their grip, they tighten it. On June 4, 1944, Allied troops entered Rome. German forces withdrew. Church bells rang. Crowds poured into the streets. Strangers embraced. For the first time in months, people exhaled. The hunt was over. The priest had survived. And slowly, the scale of what he had done began to emerge. Thousands alive because one man refused to look away. When the war ended, stories began surfacing across Europe. Former prisoners, escaped pilots, Jewish families. Again and again, they spoke of the same figure, the Irish priest who appeared when hope was almost gone. Many had never even learned his real name. To them, he was simply the Scarlet Pimpernel of the Vatican, a nickname borrowed from the legendary fictional rescuer who outwitted tyrants. Except this time, the story was real. Britain honored him. The United States expressed formal gratitude. Italy celebrated him as one of the unlikely defenders of the city. But if you had met him in the years that followed, you might never have guessed. No grand speeches, no hunger for fame, no attempt to mythologize his own actions. When asked why he risked everything, he reportedly gave answers that were almost disarmingly simple. Because it was the right thing to do. History often expects heroism to feel extraordinary, yet the people who shape it rarely see themselves as heroes. Years later, the former head of German security in Rome, Herbert Kappler, sat behind prison walls, condemned, defeated. A man once feared across an occupied city. And then, one day, he received an unexpected visitor. Hugh O'Flaherty, not to accuse, not to relive the hunt, but to listen, to counsel, to offer forgiveness. Try, for a moment, to grasp the psychological magnitude of that act. It is difficult enough to survive an enemy, almost impossible to care about his soul. Yet the visits continued, month after month, conversation after conversation, until eventually something shifted. Kappler asked to be baptized, and the man who performed the ceremony was the Irish priest he once tried relentlessly to capture. For many, it was incomprehensible. For Hugh, it was simply the final extension of the beliefs that had guided him through the war. Mercy, even when it is undeserved, especially then. Because in the end, evil rarely announces itself with certainty. It arrives gradually, reasonably, even quietly. And it depends, above all, on ordinary people choosing not to get involved. One Irish priest chose differently, and thousands lived, because he refused to look away. If this story moved you, subscribe, share it with someone who loves history.